The hoodie had always been just a little too big, the sleeves hanging low over her hands like she was trying to hide from something. I never thought much of it at first. She had always been the type to wear oversized clothes, her comfort always a priority over anything else. But as the weeks turned into months, and that same hoodie appeared day after day, I started to wonder if it was more than just comfortable. The fabric was soft, worn at the edges, faded with time, but it never quite lost its heavy, mysterious grip on her. "That's a new hoodie," I remarked casually one evening, noticing the way the hood hung around her face as she sat at the kitchen table, her head bent over her phone. The light from the overhead lamp cast a soft glow over her, but the hoodie swallowed her like it had taken over her entire existence. She looked up, the smallest glint of surprise flickering in her eyes before her lips formed a tight smile. "Oh, it's not new. Just comfy," she replied, her tone a little too casual, like she was trying to brush away any curiosity that might have sparked in me. I nodded, though something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Just comfy. That line had become her go-to excuse, but I wasn't convinced anymore. Comfort wasn't the only reason people held on to things. Not after everything we'd been through. I'd met Emma almost 2 years ago, a whirlwind of charm and laughter wrapped in a soft-spoken demeanor that drew people in. She had this way of making everyone feel seen, heard, like they mattered. It was one of the things that had initially drawn me to her, her ability to make every moment feel significant, every conversation feel meaningful. We had started dating, and it felt like everything had fallen into place, like we were building something real, something that could last. But then, the little things started to change. It was subtle at first, a shift in the way she responded to me, a distance that grew like the slow stretch of a rubber band, pulling and pulling until I wasn't sure where the end was anymore. I'd ask how her day was, and instead of her usual excited recounting of every detail, she'd give me one-word answers. When we watched movies, she would retreat further into the couch, her body language more closed off than I was used to. Even during our late-night talks, the ones we used to have that would stretch until the sun started rising, she had started to look at her phone more often, her attention fractured between me and the digital world. But none of that prepared me for the hoodie. The stranger's hoodie, the one that she had worn every day for months, the one that seemed to swallow her whole, like it was carrying secrets she didn't want to share. A hoodie that wasn't hers. I had noticed it first after our fight. The fight that I had hoped would be just another bump in the road, a misunderstanding that would pass as quickly as it had come. But it didn't. After the argument, she had retreated to the couch with the same hoodie, its faded color and fraying cuffs a glaring symbol of something I couldn't quite place. She had worn it after she'd come home late from a friend's house, when she'd never even mentioned she was going out. She'd worn it the night she came back from her mysterious work trip, when I found her talking to someone I didn't know in the middle of the night. I didn't confront her about the hoodie right away. I didn't want to seem paranoid, like I was digging for something that wasn't there. But the more I saw it, the more I noticed how often she wore it when she was distant, when her eyes were clouded with thoughts she wasn't sharing. It had become her uniform for hiding, a shield she wrapped herself in when things weren't right, when she didn't want to face me, or maybe even herself. One evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. We were sitting in the kitchen, eating dinner in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the empty spaces between us. The hoodie was draped over her shoulders again, like it had become a permanent fixture of her. She had a fork in her hand, but it didn't seem like she was eating. Her eyes were lost somewhere in the distance, focused on nothing at all. "Emma," I said, breaking the silence. She didn't look up. I said it again, more forcefully this time. "Emma, where did you get that hoodie?" She froze, her grip tightening around the fork in her hand. She finally lifted her eyes to meet mine, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't place, a moment of vulnerability that caught me off guard. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice soft but strained, like she knew exactly what I was talking about but didn't want to admit it. I stared at her, the words on the tip of my tongue. "The hoodie. It's not yours, Emma. I've seen it before. I know it's not yours." I wasn't sure if I was asking for an explanation or just stating the obvious, but either way, the truth hung heavy in the air between us. She sighed, closing her eyes for a moment, like she was bracing herself for what was coming next. "It's a gift," she said after a long pause, her voice barely above a whisper. "A gift?" I repeated, the word feeling strange in my mouth. "From who?" She looked away, the shame in her eyes almost palpable. "It's from someone I used to know. Someone who meant a lot to me. Someone who meant a lot to her." The word stung more than I expected. There was something so final about the way she said it, like whatever it was she had shared with this person was something I would never be able to touch, never be able to understand. Why have you been wearing it? I asked, my voice shaky now, the unease growing. Why keep it, Emma? If it's over, if it doesn't mean anything anymore, why wear it? She bit her lip, her fingers fidgeting with the fabric of the hoodie like she was searching for something to hold on to. I didn't know how to let go, she admitted quietly, almost as if she were talking to herself rather than to me. It felt like the only thing left of them. And when everything between us started to feel uncertain, it made me feel like maybe I could hold on to something that wasn't slipping away. The air between us thickened with unspoken truths. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to make her understand that she didn't have to hold on to the past like this. But there was a weight in her words, in the way her eyes avoided mine, that told me she had already made her choice. I don't know what you want from me, Emma, I said, my voice barely audible. But this isn't the way to fix things. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting moment before she dropped her gaze again. I don't know what to do anymore, she whispered. And in that moment, I realized that whatever was left between us wasn't just about the hoodie. It was about the pieces of her she had kept hidden, the parts of herself that she wasn't ready to let me see. The stranger's hoodie wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol. A symbol of the distance that had grown between us. A symbol of the person she used to be, or perhaps the person she was trying to find again. But more than that, it was the symbol of the love we were losing. And I wasn't sure either of us could get it back. The following days were strange. The conversations between us, once easy and effortless, now felt like walking on thin ice. Every word seemed to carry more weight, more significance, and every gesture seemed to be under a microscope. That hoodie, her strange, familiar, yet foreign hoodie, hung around her like an anchor, a constant reminder of the things unsaid, the past she wasn't ready to let go of. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about her attachment to something that didn't belong to her. Something from someone else. I started noticing the way she avoided eye contact when I asked her questions. The way her hand instinctively reached for the fabric of that hoodie whenever I broached the topic of the past, of us. It was almost like she was trying to protect it, to protect whatever part of her heart was tied to the memory of this person. And for the first time, I realized just how little I knew about the pieces of her life that predated me. She had never talked much about her past, about the relationships or experiences that had shaped her before I came into the picture. One night, as we sat on the couch, the silence stretched between us like a thick fog. I watched her, half in the shadows, the dim light of the room casting an eerie glow on her face. She was wearing that hoodie again. She had been wearing it all day. It felt as if it had become part of her, like it was no longer just fabric, but a second skin. I don't know how to help you, I blurted out, the words spilling from my lips before I could stop them. It had been building for days, the frustration, the confusion, the weight of not knowing where we stood. She looked up, but instead of meeting my gaze, her eyes lingered on the floor. You can't fix this, Alex, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. This is something I have to figure out on my own. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with the distance that had crept into our relationship. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. There was no point in arguing, she had already made up her mind. Whatever was going on inside her, whatever unresolved feelings she was carrying around, it was too much for her to bear, and somehow, I had become the outsider in her life. I know you're trying, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But this is different. This isn't about us. It's not about you. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or hurt by her words. On one hand, it was as if she was protecting me from whatever was haunting her, but on the other, it felt like a cruel dismissal. Then what is it about? I asked, my tone sharp, too sharp for my liking. What does that hoodie mean? Her lips parted, and for a moment, I thought she might finally tell me. I wanted her to. I wanted to understand the pieces of her that had been locked away, the parts of her heart that weren't mine. But instead of opening up, she pulled the hoodie tighter around herself, her eyes darting nervously as if she feared that the very question I was asking might break something inside her. I can't explain it right now, she said, her voice wavering. I'm sorry. I wanted to yell, to scream that I deserved more than this. That we deserved more than this. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Because deep down, I knew the truth, she didn't want to talk about it. She wasn't ready to face whatever ghost she was holding on to, and as much as I wanted to be the one to help her move past it, I couldn't force her to open up. She had to come to that conclusion on her own. And so, the days dragged on. I found myself growing more restless, more unsettled in my own home. It was as though everything I had known about our relationship had been flipped upside down. The little things I had once taken for granted, the shared jokes, the spontaneous conversations, the way we would finish each other's sentences, now felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. One afternoon, I came home to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a half-eaten sandwich. Her phone lay next to her, the screen cracked, a reminder of how long it had been since she had replaced it. I had offered to get her a new one several times, but she always refused. It was like she was holding on to something that wasn't even worth holding on to anymore. "You okay?" I asked softly, leaning against the doorframe. She didn't respond at first, her eyes focused on the chipped edge of her plate. Finally, she looked up, and the faintest trace of a smile crossed her lips. "Yeah, just tired. A lot on my mind." I took a step forward, unsure of what to say. I wanted to reach out, to hold her and tell her that everything would be okay, but I knew I couldn't promise that. Not with the distance between us growing wider every day. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself, you know," I said quietly. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out. Together." Her eyes flickered to me, but she didn't answer. Instead, she stood up abruptly and walked toward the living room, leaving me standing in the kitchen, feeling more helpless than I had in a long time. Over the next few days, Emma became more distant, more withdrawn. It was like she was physically there, but emotionally she had checked out. We spent most of our time in silence, the space between us filled with unspoken words. And all the while, that damn hoodie lingered, a constant reminder of everything that was wrong. I tried to focus on other things, work, friends, anything to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away. I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend everything was fine when nothing felt fine. One night, after we had eaten dinner in almost complete silence, I caught her staring at the hoodie again. Her fingers traced the edges of the fabric, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't just sadness or confusion, it was guilt. "Emma," I began, my voice tentative. "If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But I need you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She looked up at me, her eyes soft but distant. "I know you are. But I don't know how to be here. Not the way you want me to be." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long trying to understand her, trying to fix things between us, that I had forgotten something important. She didn't know how to fix it either. Whatever she was carrying, whatever she had buried deep inside her, it was weighing her down, and no matter how much I tried to help, I couldn't carry it for her. The silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't just the silence of two people who didn't know what to say. It was the silence of two people who didn't know how to save each other anymore. The days felt like they were stretching longer, like time was dragging itself just to see how much we could endure. I wanted to talk to her, to ask her more about the hoodie, to ask her to explain everything, anything, that was going on in her head. But every time I approached, it felt like I was walking through a fog. She became a stranger in so many ways, someone I didn't recognize, not because she had changed, but because she had retreated so deeply into herself that I couldn't reach her anymore. And that damn hoodie. It wasn't even the hoodie itself, but what it represented: distance, separation, and the growing silence between us. I started to resent it, that hoodie. I didn't even know where she had gotten it from, but I was starting to hate how it seemed to wrap itself around her like a shield. Every time she wore it, I felt like I was losing her, bit by bit. It wasn't the fabric that bothered me, it was what she was holding on to, what she refused to let go of. It was about a week after I had first noticed the shift that she said something that made me stop in my tracks. We were sitting in the living room, the TV on but neither of us paying attention to it. She had been wearing the hoodie again, of course, and I had been trying my hardest not to let my frustration show. But it was impossible to ignore the way she pulled it tighter around her, almost as if she were hiding from the world inside it. "I'm sorry," she said out of nowhere, her voice soft but clear. I looked at her, confused. "Sorry? For what?" She hesitated before answering. "For not being who you need me to be." The words were so simple, yet they hit me like a freight train. I had spent so much time trying to figure out why she was pulling away, why she was hiding behind that damn hoodie, but hearing her say those words made everything feel too real. I couldn't ignore it anymore. She wasn't just distant. She wasn't just avoiding me, she felt like she was failing. Failing me. Failing us. "Emma," I started, my voice more forceful than I intended, "you don't have to be anything but yourself. You don't need to apologize for being who you are. But I can't help if you won't let me in. If you don't talk to me." Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place: guilt, fear, regret? I don't know how to be myself right now, Alex, she whispered. I don't know who I am anymore. It was like she had ripped open a part of herself I wasn't ready to see. The part of her that was so lost, so tangled in something she couldn't explain, that she couldn't even recognize herself. And I didn't know how to fix that. I didn't know if I could. I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice breaking. It wasn't something I'd said out loud before, not in so many words. But the truth hung between us now, raw and unspoken. But I don't know how to help you if you keep shutting me out. If you keep shutting us out. She turned away, a quick movement, as if she were trying to hide from what I had just said. I could see her hands trembling as they gripped the edges of the hoodie. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I'm scared that I'll lose myself completely, that I won't be able to figure out what's left of me. The word struck something deep inside me. I understood. I understood fear, the fear of becoming a version of yourself that you didn't recognize, the fear of losing control. But I also knew that living in that fear was suffocating. We couldn't continue like this, stuck in this strange limbo, neither of us truly able to breathe. Emma, please, I said, my voice softer now, don't let fear decide for you. You don't have to face this alone. We'll figure it out. Together. But she didn't respond. Instead, she stood up abruptly, pulling the hoodie tighter around her like a shield. I watched her walk out of the room, feeling my heart crack with every step she took away from me. I sat there for a long time after that, the silence between us so loud I could hear it ringing in my ears. I wanted to chase after her, to demand that she talk to me, to tell me what she was feeling, but something inside me told me to wait. That she needed space, that she needed time. But how long could I wait? How long before the distance between us became too wide to bridge? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind. I thought about everything Emma had said, about how lost she felt. And I thought about that damn hoodie. I wondered if it had been a gift, if it had come from someone she had once loved. I wondered if it had become a part of her, something she couldn't let go of, even if she wanted to. The next day, I found myself standing in the living room again, staring at that damn hoodie. I had already told myself I wouldn't confront her about it, not yet. But the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. That hoodie wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of something from the past, something she wasn't ready to let go of. I waited until she came back into the room, her eyes still puffy from whatever emotions had been running through her. She looked hesitant, almost afraid of what I might say. I've been thinking, I started, my voice carefully controlled. About the hoodie. She stiffened immediately, her shoulders tensing. Alex, please. No, let me talk, I said, stepping toward her. I know it's not about the hoodie itself, but about what it represents. Something you're holding onto from your past. I get it, I do. But you need to decide if it's something you want to carry with you forever, or if it's something you need to let go of to move forward. Her lips trembled as she stared at me, the weight of her unspoken thoughts pressing down on her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I can't fix what happened before me, Emma, I said, the frustration clear in my voice now. But I can be here for what happens next. But you have to meet me halfway. You have to let go of whatever it is that's holding you back. She wiped her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she stepped closer to me. I want to, she whispered, but I don't know how. I didn't know how either. But I wasn't going to let her figure it out alone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we weren't too far gone after all. Maybe there was still a chance for us, if we could both be brave enough to let go of the things that were keeping us apart. It's strange how the hardest things in life always seem to happen in the quiet moments, when everything else is still. I sat there that night, on the edge of the bed, staring at Emma as she stood in front of the mirror. The reflection between us was distorted, as if the glass itself couldn't decide whether we were even standing in the same room. She wasn't wearing the hoodie, but that didn't mean I didn't notice it, because it was still there, somewhere inside her, buried just beneath the surface. She had agreed to talk. I don't know why I was so surprised, but she did. It wasn't like the floodgates opened immediately. No, it wasn't dramatic. There was no lightning or thunder to signal that we were about to unravel whatever it was that was holding her back. It was the softest whisper of a moment where, finally, we started to unravel the story, her story. She sat down next to me, a good foot of space between us at first. I could feel the weight of that distance, the air heavy with unspoken things. But it was there, in that silence, that I felt the shift. "I never thought it would be like this," she said, her voice barely a murmur. I could hear the sadness there, the quiet surrender. "I didn't want you to see me like this." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I didn't interrupt. I let her speak, knowing she needed to get this out, even if it wasn't going to be easy. "I used to wear that hoodie all the time," she continued, her eyes staring at the fabric in her hands. It was his. Adam's. There it was. The name I hadn't dared to ask about before, the name that seemed to hang in the air with an unsettling finality. The name I knew was tied to something that she couldn't let go of, something that had never really disappeared. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to," I said, the words instinctive, even though my heart was hammering in my chest. "But if you do, I'm here. I promise." She didn't look at me at first, her fingers tracing the edges of the fabric like it held answers she was too afraid to uncover. I could see the hesitation in her posture, the way her shoulders hunched as if the memory alone was too much to bear. "I never thought I'd be with anyone else," she finally confessed, her voice catching in her throat. "When we were together, I was all in. I thought this was it. I thought we had a future. But then it ended. And I didn't know how to move on." Her words felt like a punch to the stomach. She was talking about him, Adam. He wasn't just some past boyfriend. He was the reason she had been wearing that hoodie, the reason it was so hard for her to let go. "I'm sorry, Alex," she said, her voice trembling now. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to feel like you were second best. But the truth is, I didn't know if I was ready to let go of him. Of us. And when I couldn't answer that question, I just kept hiding. And that hoodie, it felt like I could still carry a part of him with me. It was something tangible, something real." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat thick and heavy. I had known that there was something she was holding on to, something that was making her pull away. But hearing it now, hearing how long she had been carrying this burden, how long she had been caught between us, made me realize just how much I had been blind to. I reached out, my hand hovering near hers. It was instinctive, like a gentle offer of reassurance. I didn't want her to feel alone anymore. "You don't have to carry that weight on your own, Emma. I'm here." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. But when she finally looked at me, her eyes were filled with tears, the weight of everything crashing down at once. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, wiping her face. "I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to let go. I was holding on to the past because I was afraid of what the future might look like without it. I didn't want to face it. I didn't know how." "You don't have to be sorry," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You didn't ask for this to happen. You didn't ask to be stuck between two versions of yourself. But now you have to decide which one you want to be. And I'm not going to rush you, but I can't just stand here and watch you disappear. You're still here, Emma. You're still you." Her lips quivered, and I watched as the weight of the past seemed to break her down, piece by piece. She had been carrying that old version of herself around for so long that she didn't know who she was anymore. I could see that now. It wasn't just the hoodie, it was everything that came with it. The love she had for Adam, the heartbreak, the loss. She hadn't just lost him, she had lost herself in the process. "I don't know how to be just me anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I couldn't imagine the pain of it, the suffocating weight of a past love still hovering over you, dictating every move, every decision. But I also knew that she couldn't move forward unless she chose to leave that past behind. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," I said, my voice steady but kind. "But I'm here to help you, if you'll let me. You don't have to carry it alone." I think that's when I saw something shift. A small glimmer of relief in her eyes. She wasn't fully ready, not yet, but she was beginning to see that it wasn't about letting go of Adam entirely, it was about letting go of the hold he had on her, of the fear that she might forget him if she moved on. "I don't know how to let go of him," she whispered, the words filled with so much vulnerability, so much uncertainty. "But I want to try. I don't know how." "You don't have to do it alone, Emma," I said, my voice soft, full of sincerity. "I'm not asking you to forget him. I'm asking you to find yourself again. The version of you that's still here. The one I fell in love with." She nodded, a shaky breath escaping her lips as she wiped her eyes. "I want to. I really do. But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "Scared that I won't recognize who I am without him. Scared that the pieces of me that were him will never fit into the life I have now." Her voice broke, and she shook her head, looking away. "I don't want to lose him completely, but I don't want to lose you either." I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of her words. This was more than just a hoodie. This was about who she was and who she wanted to become. It was about facing the past without letting it consume her. You don't have to choose between him and me, I said quietly. I'm not asking for you to forget about the love you had with him. But you can't keep living in the shadow of it. You have your own story to write now, Emma. You don't have to do it alone, but you do have to move forward. For yourself. She sat there, quiet, for what felt like an eternity. Her eyes were distant, as if she were looking at something I couldn't see, searching for something in herself that had been buried for so long. I'm scared, she repeated, the words soft, but powerful. But maybe it's time to let go. And just like that, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that she could. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. We both took our time. Emma, wrestling with the weight of her past, and me, trying to figure out how to be there for her without pushing too hard. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at her, I saw the same hesitation in her eyes. It was as if she was standing on the edge of something, unsure whether to take the leap or stay firmly planted on the ground. She had stopped wearing the hoodie for a while, and I noticed that the absence of it made things feel lighter. Not because I had wanted her to get rid of it, but because it felt like she was starting to let go of the things that were holding her back. Slowly, bit by bit, she started to talk more, about Adam, about the past, about her fears. It was the little things that mattered, the moments where she let her guard down just enough for me to see the real Emma. One evening, after dinner, we sat on the couch together, a familiar kind of silence hanging between us. The kind of silence that didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. We had learned to exist in it, to share space without needing words to fill it. I don't know how to thank you, she said suddenly, her voice almost too soft to hear. She wasn't looking at me, but I could see the vulnerability in her expression. You don't need to thank me, I replied, leaning back, feeling the weight of the conversation but not the pressure. I'm not doing this for any reward. I'm doing it because I care about you. Because you matter. And because you're worth it. Her eyes flicked over to me, and for the first time in days, I saw something shift. There was a softness there, a tenderness that hadn't been there before. I'm scared, Alex, she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. I don't know who I am without all of this. Without the past. I wanted to say something to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I knew better than to offer empty promises. Instead, I took her hand, gently, as if offering her the reassurance I couldn't fully articulate. You're still you, Emma. You've always been you. Even when you didn't know it, you've been the same person. And it's okay to not have all the answers right now. It's okay to be lost for a little while. But you'll find your way back. You'll find your way. She squeezed my hand in return, her grip soft but steady. I think I'm starting to believe that, she whispered. And I believed it too. I didn't know what the future would hold. I didn't know if things would go back to the way they were, or if we would forge something new together. But in that moment, I knew that we were moving forward. We were both moving forward. The next morning, Emma did something that surprised me. She walked into the living room, her expression a mixture of determination and nervousness, holding the hoodie in her hands. I looked at her, confused, wondering if this was the moment where she decided to let go of the past for good. Can we get rid of it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not needing any more explanation. I stood up and took the hoodie from her, holding it in my hands for a moment. It was just fabric, nothing more. But it had meant so much to her. Still, it wasn't about the hoodie. It was about what it symbolized. And right then, I could see that she was ready to release it. We walked together to the trash bin outside. It felt strange, almost ceremonial, but I knew it was the right thing to do. It wasn't just about throwing away a piece of clothing. It was about Emma choosing to step away from a version of herself that was no longer serving her. She was ready to move on. Ready to find herself again. We stood there for a moment, the trash can open in front of us. She hesitated for a second, but then, without looking back, she dropped the hoodie in. I guess that's it, she said quietly, her voice distant but resolute. I took a deep breath and turned to face her. You don't have to let go of everything at once. But this is a start. You're not alone in this, Emma. She nodded slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. I know. I'm starting to realize that. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close for the first time in what felt like ages. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't about finding comfort in what we used to be. It was about finding comfort in what we could become. I'm here, I whispered into her hair. Always. She clung to me for a moment, and then pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting mine. There was something different in her gaze now, a clarity, a kind of peace that hadn't been there before. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was looking at the real Emma. The one who had been buried beneath the weight of her past, but who was finally starting to breathe again. You're right, she said softly. I am still me. And for the first time in months, I smiled, truly smiled. Yeah, you are. There was no grand resolution. No fireworks or dramatic changes. But in that moment, I knew that we were both on the right path. She was starting to find herself again. And I was here, by her side, every step of the way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we had a chance.